Welcome to this webinar series titled False Solutions Exposed, Busting Myths and Unveiling Real Solutions to Plastic Pollution, brought to you by the Break Free from Plastic movement.
Our moderator for this session is Arpita Bhagat. Arpita is the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or GAIA's Plastic Policy Officer for the Asia-Pacific region. Her work focuses on strengthening the capacity and engagement of members in global and national advocacy work towards plastic production caps, advancing zero-waste policies, just transition for waste pickers and workers, and phasing out false solutions. Gaia is a network that aims to catalyze a global shift towards environmental justice by strengthening grassroots social movements that advance solutions to waste and pollution.
It's an actual honor to be here among such wonderful audience and the experts and panelists we have today. Hi, my name is Arpita, and you can refer to me as such. My pronouns are she and her, and I hope wherever you are, you're having a pleasant day and we learn a lot. So welcome to the fourth session very officially. And we will have the False Solutions Exposed webinar series every Wednesday till July 19th with various kinds of solutions that are being peddled currently by corporations and supported by international finance institutions and governments. Members of the Break Free from Plastic movement have come together today to hold a series aiming to debunk false solutions to plastic pollution that are rampant across Asia Pacific and which promote effective and lasting solutions such as reduction in plastic production, zero waste and reuse systems. This series is especially timely, given that we are currently negotiating a global instrument to address plastic pollution through a comprehensive approach across the life cycle of plastic from extraction of petrochemicals production and eventual disposal, where a lot of the false technology is applied. The negotiations of the treaty have again brought to fore these many false solutions. And we know that industry is pushing hard and fast for these solutions to become mainstream, which is why it is very essential that we understand what these are and how do we push for the real solutions, that is the reuse and refill and many others that we will learn about today. And another problem with this false solution is not just that they are ineffective, but they also create the additional problem and exacerbate the problem of plastic pollution with the various environmental, health, and other social costs as well. So in today's session, we will discuss emerging alternatives to plastics, their impact on environment and human health. We will also touch upon the impact on human health, as well as present reuse as a solution to plastic pollution problem. So with that, for the next 40 minutes, we should learn and burst these myths to a false solution. And to start us off, we have Lisa Zimmerman. She will provide us with the understanding of bioplastic and other plastic alternatives. She's completed her master's in science degree in biological sciences with a focus in ecotoxicology, molecular toxicology, and biochemistry at the University of Constance. After working as a project manager at Oro Verde, Tropical Forest Foundation in Germany and Guatemala, she did her PhD at the Goethe University, Frankfurt and Maine. Here, her focus was on investigating the in vitro toxicity and composition of chemicals contained in and migrating from conventional plastic products and their bio-based as well as biodegradable alternatives. She also analyzed whether plastic chemicals or the plastic properties are the main driver for microplastic toxicity using a common freshwater organism. Her research was part of the PlastX project based at the Institute of Social Ecological Research in Frankfurt am Main. The aim of this inter and transdisciplinary project was to explore the role of plastics in a society and their impacts in the environment. I know I said a lot, but I can assure you there is a lot to learn, and I'm very excited to learn, and I hope you are too. And once again, reminding that if you have questions, please do post them in the Q&A section, and we hope that we are able to address at least some of them. And over to you, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot for this very kind introduction. I hope you can see my screen now. If not, let me know. So I guess that's the case. My talk today, I will focus on bioplastics, since they are commonly promoted as a more environmentally friendly alternative to conventional plastics, meaning petroleum-based plastics, non-biodegradable ones. For instance, they promise the reduction of fossil carbon use, and litter generation. But are they really more sustainable, and what about their safety? So today I want to give some insights into that topic. And my focus will be on food packaging, since that's a major application of bioplastics and the chemicals in packaging and their safety. First of all, I want to clarify the term bioplastics, which can be a bit misleading as it covers two different things. On the one hand, it can refer to bio-based materials, which are made from renewable feedstock sources, such as corn or sugarcane. And on the other hand, it can refer to biodegradable materials, which are designed for microbial conversion into carbon dioxide, methane, biomass, and mineral salts. Compostable plastics are a subset of biodegradable ones, and they typically decompose in industrial composting facilities. So what I want to clarify here is that not all bio-based plastics are biodegradable, and not all biodegradable plastics are bio-based. So they can be either or both. And looking into Asia, more than 40% of bioplastics are currently produced in Asia. Okay, so that's the short introduction, but let's dive into the topic of safety directly. So for conventional plastics, meaning petroleum non-biodegradable ones, it is widely known that they contain hundreds of hazardous chemicals. And this is problematic because these chemicals can transfer from the plastic material into the food, for example, and thereby humans are directly exposed to these plastic chemicals. But what about bioplastics? Do they also include chemicals of concern? And actually, this was a question I was asking myself during my PhD thesis. And to analyze this, we acquired over 40 bioplastic products, mostly food packaging, extracted the chemicals contained in these materials, and then applied them to a set of in vitro bioassays to study their toxicity, and then also we analyzed the chemical composition. And actually what we found is that 2/3 of the products or the chemicals in these products induced an effect in at least one of the assays we were applying them to. And comparing this to a set of conventional plastics, we found that actually bioplastics, just as conventional plastics, can contain toxic chemical mixtures. And like from this perspective, they are not any better. And looking at the chemical composition, we found that bioplastics contain a wide range of chemicals. And that is somehow logical, since their manufacture and functionality depends on the addition of synthetic polymers, fillers, and additives. And for example, they help to offset limitations inherent to bioplastic materials, such as brittleness or low gas barrier properties. And containing all these man-made intentionally and unintentionally added substances, bioplastics cannot be considered as pure biomaterials, but because they also have a synthetic component. But we were not the only ones who showed that bioplastics and their chemicals can have negative impacts, not only on human cell lines, that was the study we did, but there's also more and more literature coming up that they can have effects on terrestrial ecosystems, as well as on freshwater and marine organisms. But what about other sustainability aspects? So importantly, the performance and sustainability of bioplastics cannot be evaluated based on toxicity alone. Here, other environmental and social impacts also need to be taken into consideration. And for example, to be taken into account is sourcing of these materials, like especially bio-based ones. And there is a tool which is called life cycle assessments, which helps to analyze the environmental impacts of a product along its whole life cycle. And this suggests that bio-based plastics, so those made from renewable feedstock sources, can save fossil resources and reduce greenhouse gas emission. However, crop cultivation and industrial agriculture for bio-based plastic requires water, land, chemicals, such as pesticides and fertilizers, and it may also compete with food production. Therefore, bio-based plastics can ultimately have higher social and environmental impact than conventional plastics. However, these environmental impacts can be reduced by using agro-industrial, forest and food wastes and sustainable agriculturing methods, like, for example, don't use pesticides, don't use monocultures. So this was more the focus on bio-based plastics, but looking at biodegradable plastics, actually to the extent and how fast these materials biodegrade depends on their composition, like all the chemicals used in there, the polymer which they are made of, as well as the environmental conditions such as temperature, water, humidity, and the presence of microorganisms. And for instance, there's a study which has analyzed the bioplastic polylactic acid, which actually shows that it has a low biodegradability in water. And actually, most bioplastics which are currently on the market won't degrade in the open environment, like, for example, in the ocean. And mostly not even on the home compost within a long time period. And this is why actually this dependence on the environmental condition, as well as consumer confusion about how to properly dispose these materials, has many stakeholders led to agree that biodegradable, or rather compostable, plastics are only suitable for certain applications. And this, what you can see here, is a proposal of the European Commission, and it basically says that the biodegradable plastics are suitable for applications where the packaging cannot be separated from the organic food, such as in the case of tea bags or coffee capsules, or vegetable and fruit stickers. And the requirement needs to be that they really degrade in composting, in industrial composting facilities. Yeah, and one more thing I want to mention, that also in the looking at the end of life, biodegradable plastics are mostly designed for single use, and this conflicts with ambitions towards a circular economy where resource loss is minimized. And also, bio-based materials are not yet recycled and may even contaminate established recycling schemes, since the waste management has yet not been established. And I shortly sum up, and then see that my time is over, I guess. So to summarize, bioplastics can provide benefits over conventional plastics, such as reducing fossil carbon use, but just as conventional plastics, they can affect human and environmental health through varying degrees. For example, since they are chemically complex materials, they can lead to safety challenges. So bioplastics are not yet the solution to the plastic problem, but can contribute to it when designed safe and sustainable. And with that, I shortly refer, we also have a fact sheet on this topic of bioplastic, which you can download on our websites. And that's the organization I'm working with now, which is the Food Packaging Forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I think, like me, everybody would have learned and understood that bioplastics may not be the solution that it's touted to be. And I know we have a question for you already. I encourage other questions also, but that will, the questions we'll take in the last Q&A round. Now over to our next speaker. I'm very, very honored to introduce Mageshwari Sangaralingam. She's a research officer in the Community and Environment section of the Consumers Association of Penang, that is CAP in Malaysia, since 1992. Her responsibility in CAP involves assisting communities affected by destructive development projects pollution, and policies that bring about negative impacts on the communities and the environment. She's currently the Honorary Secretary of Shabat Alam Malaysia, that's Friends of the Earth Malaysia, and she holds a master's degree in environmental management and bachelor's of science in human development. In the past few years, she has been actively documenting the impacts of plastic waste trade and networking with various groups calling for an end to waste colonialism. And we know that's a big problem in Asia Pacific, as well as plastic pollution. So here it is. Magesh, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can see my presentation. So thanks to Lisa, who had given an introduction of bioplastics and in terms of the safety. So I will be speaking to you more in terms of the bane of monoculture for bioplastics, and also in terms of what is the current scenario. Yeah. Okay, so as mentioned by Arpita, I work with two groups. One is the consumer group in Penang, and also Friends of the Earth Malaysia. So in terms of the bioplastics, examples of biomaterial used, Lisa had already given a few, so these are some of the materials used. It could be corn, potato, soy, hemp, certain types of sugars, so it's sugar cane or sugar beet, and food, agriculture waste, algae, seaweed, and there's a lot of research that is being done to come up with more bio-based plastics. Yeah, so there's bioplastics and also the compostable plastics. Okay, so in terms of the production capacity, so these are information that we got from the European Bioplastics NOAA Institute research. In 2022, if you can see the material type, there's at least the most is PE, yeah, 14.8% is polyethylene plastics. So total of bioplastics production was 2.22 million tons. And you can also see on the right, in terms of the total capacity, yeah, in terms of bio-based or non-biodegradable plastics, then there's also biodegradable plastics and what is forecasted. Okay, next is in terms of the market segment. As mentioned by Lisa, packaging is the largest market segment for bioplastics with 48%, yeah, almost 1.1 million tons of the total bioplastics market in 2022. All right, so next, so there's the flexible packaging, rigid packaging, and also some other production. This Lisa had shown, but you can see the highest production capacity is in Asia. And this is predicted to increase, yeah, from 41.4% to 63% by 2027. So in terms of that, you can also just imagine how much of it is going to be from monoculture crops. The land use estimation for bioplastics is, it looks little here. Supposedly it's 0.8 million hectares or 0.015%. And in 2027, this will be increased to 2.9 million hectares for bioplastics. But you can see here, the amount for food and feed is actually very little, 25%. A lot of it is for livestock production, and then there's also the issue of biofuels. And in terms of biofuels, also this is also another industrial agriculture that we are fighting, yeah, because it is also monoculture. Okay, so the impacts of monoculture. So okay, so bioplastics are made from plant feedstocks, but then it is still plastics, yeah. As mentioned by Lisa, also you have all the additives and monomers and all that included in the production of bioplastics, and this requires carbon-intensive industrial agriculture. For those who already know about the impacts of monoculture farming, you know that this is just monoculture crops, which needs a lot of agrochemicals to be used. And to make these agrochemicals, you also need fossil fuels, and it is also in terms of the production itself, it also emits a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot of impacts to the climate, yeah. And the more of pesticides that you use, there is also a lot of resistance, yeah. So that's why we are saying changing organism resistance, and also soil degradation happens because in terms of the agrochemicals that are seeping into the soil, it is going to harm the microorganisms in the soil, and also our earthworms. Earthworms are farmers' friends, yeah, and so all these microorganisms will be degraded. And we also have our water bodies contaminated with agrochemicals, with the residues, and also eliminates biological controls in terms of farming. If you're looking into agroecology and also farming, biological control is being used. You have the friendly predators, so with the use of agrochemicals, all this will be eliminated. In conclusion, monoculture is capital intensive, chemical intensive, and also energy intensive. In terms of the monoculture for bioplastics, so there was a Nature Climate Change study, and a lot of countries are now saying, okay, so with the Global Plastics Treaty, we are going to phase out and also phase out and ban certain types of plastics. So what is the solution? A lot of the countries are recommending bioplastics. So a complete shift of the plastics production of right now approximately 250 million tons to bio-based plastics would require as much as 5% of all arable land. So 5% of arable land for bioplastics. So what will this what will the impact be? So increased demand for this land can lead to deforestation and also food insecurity. So the question is, do you want land for food or to make plastics? And so this is the question that we should be answering. So what is the real solutions? Later on, you will be listening to Rahyang, who will be talking in terms of the solutions. So this is something new that I had learned. Microplastics in agrochemicals. This was a report done by CL, Center for International Environmental Law. And since agriculture is a significant user of intentionally added microplastics. So this is a deliberate dispersion of microplastics through the application of plastic coated fertilizers and pesticides. Previously it's like we used to just think about fertilizers and pesticides. Now they are coating these agrochemicals with plastics. So these agrochemicals are encapsulated, so it will be a controlled release. And it spreads across soils and crops. So this is another issue that we have to look into, because it is also harmful to our health and the environment. We have learned about microplastics in our blood, in the placenta. So this is another issue that we are, should be aware of. Okay, so in conclusion, bioplastics is a false solution, and we will hear more in terms of what are the solutions for this plastics. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nagesh. I think it's one of the things that we don't discuss too often, the whole piece around land and agriculture conflict that bioplastics will bring up. So I'm really glad that you presented this piece. And now we have our third esteemed speaker, Raymond San Pascal from Healthcare Without Harm. He is the Executive Director, a population, health, and environment policy advocate. He brings with him experience of working in civil society organizations engaged in social development work, and has dedicated many years on policy development advocacy and working with policymakers and stakeholders on population, health, environment, and sustainable development issues. Having worked with an extensive network of parliamentarians, health professionals, community, and civil society leaders, Raymond has helped form and strengthen coalitions of advocates and upholding health and social justice in the Philippines and across Asia Pacific region. He has a master's in public health from University of Washington in Seattle, and has also completed a certificate program on international health. He's also finished a population leadership program as a Gates Packard International Fellow, also at the University of Washington. Welcome, Raymond, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me clearly. I am in a remote part of Pangasinan where the internet is quite erratic. We are doing our mid-year retreat in Healthcare Without Harm, Southeast Asia. But I'm really happy to discuss with you today plastic toxicity in plastics in healthcare, and Pei is helping me roll my slides. So let's go to the next one. the environmental risk associated with plastics. Pei, can you do that? Can you click my slide?
Can you see
Okay,
it
next
now?
one. Yeah, I can see it now.
Excellent.
Yeah. Next slide, please. All right. Yeah, I think I just need to reiterate before I proceed to the topic on plastics in healthcare. What we already have heard partly with the two previous speakers, the environmental risk associated with plastics, that the absence of sanitary glands will contribute to land damage, the toxic pollutants from plastic waste management technology include lead, mercury, dioxins, and acid gases that leach into the soil and water and gets back to human and impacting our health. And the adverse environmental impact of plastic pollution occur at multiple levels, both from molecular, biochemical, to people and the ecosystem. Now, there have been studies in the next slide about the health impact of plastics. And let me just, in in this slide, just summarize what these are. Plastic contribute to increase in mortality rates because of the diseases that it exacerbates, such as pneumoconiosis, silicosis, cardiovascular diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and lung cancer. Microplastics, as again, it was a bit tackled today, can potentially cause health effects through entry into the human body through inhalation and ingestion, which will also cause other fatal issues such as oxidative stress, apoptosis, and necrosis. And lately, there have been further studies that relate plastic pollution to occurrence of cancer, diabetes, chronic inflammation, and various other immune-related diseases. And the erroneous or misplaced disposal of plastic waste, particularly by burning, makes the situation even more complex when toxic chemicals easily enter our body, human body, as we breathe them in. So the absence of a sustainable waste disposal system in itself that push plastics to be burned also contributes to illnesses on humans. The next slide talks about to a comparison of waste hierarchy with that of the circular economy. In healthcare without harm, we're trying to understand and as well as test the validity of what we call circular healthcare. This is more along the second model there of circular economy, but working in the context of a healthcare system or facilities. Now, as we learn about circularity in healthcare, we also acknowledge in the next slide that we started understanding plastics even before the pandemic. When we were doing plastic audit way back in 2018, 2019, and it went on up to the pandemic years. Here, this is at least we did this step-by-step audit process from our manual that was developed particularly for healthcare workers and leaders for them to understand plastics in their own hospitals. And this is what we proved to be the effective steps in doing audit. But of course, things have changed, and you would see the next slide, uh, before the pandemic, this is what usually would constitute plastic in a typical hospital, whether in Indonesia or in the Philippines. And this is based on the actual audits that we conducted in 2018, in 2019. For example, you would see there that on a waste per day basis, there is the composition of plastics in these hospitals, whether it is the three hospitals in the Philippines, from Alabang Medical to St. Paul, and then two others from Indonesia. That will tell us that there is around 50 to 70% of plastic waste found in the daily stream of waste in a hospital. It's no joke, even prior to the pandemic. If you ask what are those plastics, it's not necessarily medical related plastic. In fact, most of it are also food packaging, sachets used in toiletries, or packaging toilet necessities. Thus, if we are talking about plastics in healthcare, if it is 60% plastic, it can be that out of that 50 to 60%, a half of it is regular plastic waste, such as food packaging and sachets and related to toiletries. When we did this audit, we made a prescription, and this is found in our toolkit, to the hospitals, and it initiated reforms because audit made management of the hospitals and the staff realize and made them embarrassed to see that, for example, there is PET bottle even in what is considered as a hazardous waste. And the same PET bottle will be found in the black bags. It can also be found in the green bag. It can also be found in the yellow bag. So obviously, segregation is not necessarily practiced even in hospitals. So prescriptions such as simple products like disposable knives, forks, spoons, straws, fast food clamshells can be removed. And many of these hospitals did until pandemic came in 2020. But the work in addressing single-use plastic and unnecessary plastic and hazardous plastics in healthcare has started way back prior to the pandemic. It has worsened, of course, as we all know, because not only that the caution and the intent to manage plastics in healthcare was abandoned by most hospitals beginning March 2020 onward. But secondly, that they begin protecting themselves, both the healthcare workers, the guests, and then the patients, of course, with so much plastic. And the third, that what made things worse is that in the name of protecting people from pandemic, there was an extreme caution that there are hospitals that we found that everything that they use as a waste is classified, therefore, as infectious hazardous. So segregation is totally abandoned. The flooding of plastics waste from hospital has been set aside in the name of protecting people from the pandemic. So we continue going on with our waste audit, even in the time of the hype from 2021, 2022, up to even part of the 2023, we're still doing audits. And the methodology has changed. We were no longer opening bags, unlike to find the proxy, how to determine what's inside those waste bags by looking into the procurement, by looking into the supply chain, by looking into what every ward department is consuming on a daily basis, treating COVID patients. And therefore, we are able to estimate still what sort of waste do they produce at the end of the day or at the end of the week when the next supply comes. And this is important because then we are able to further link how upstream purchases impact hospital waste. And therefore, it strengthens our belief that to stop plastic waste in the hospitals, it is necessary and a fundamental step to look into the procurement system of the hospitals itself. And we did our findings, key findings, for example, in the next
Sorry,
slide.
Sir, we need
Sorry.
to wrap it up. You are
Okay.
out of
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Can you wrap it up, please?
Yeah, I'm wrapping up. Yeah. Okay, so you see there the key findings. Now, the last two slides is already on the Global Plastics Treaty and how Health Voices articulates its position on the whole treaty negotiation and the final treaty agreement. Hopefully, say 2 years from now. Let me just show the last slide here. Where do we stand vis-a-vis the plastic treaty negotiation? Learning from the many engagements on plastics. One, we take the view that there should not be any exemption for plastics in healthcare. Therefore, if plastics is found toxic in one place outside of healthcare, it's just as toxic inside particularly hospitals. Second, that we should be able to determine the chemical constituents of plastic to determine its health impact. So there should be transparency in that. Third, that there should be mandatory action throughout the cycle because health impact begins from the extraction, production, consumption, waste treatment, and disposal. And there is a practical step that can be done to phase out unnecessary and unsustainable plastic products. And in the setting of hospitals, whether equipment, whether supplies, whether it's their cafeteria supplies, there is a way to redesign plastic products that we get rid of unnecessary plastics. And then the blame should be as well put onto the burden of the producers themselves. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And this has been really helpful to hear. I think just your call for phasing out all single-use plastics from healthcare is good to hear because that's something that we are often concerned about in those of us working on the treaty. So now we now have talked extensively about the concerns with bioplastics, toxicity of plastics in healthcare, and the many ramifications of these problems. Now it's time to talk about real solutions. So you all can buckle up and feel a little bit more positive because we have with us Ryan Muzandara, who's going to be talking about the solutions to plastic pollution that we're all pushing forward. And Ryan has a decade of experience in environmental campaign. He obtained a Bachelor of Agriculture from Universitas Padjadjaran from Bandung, Indonesia, and a Master of Communication from in Science from Universitas Paramadina, Jakarta. He's currently the Deputy Director of Indonesia Diet Plastic Bag Movement, a nonprofit that encourages the ban of single-use plastic through reuse practices, ecosystem advocacy, and campaign for a better environment. He's also the coordinator of Alliance for Zero Waste Indonesia, as we call it, a member of Break Free from Plastic Movement, as well as the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Over to Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arpita. And yes, based on the previous presenters, the solutions to the single use is not with the single use. So in plastic bag diet, we promote the solutions to the single-use plastic pollution is to a reuse ecosystems. Next slide. We have this project called Jakarta Reuse Movements, an initiatives by Plastic Bag Diet and NVU to create the ecosystems that supports a reuse lifestyle. So we start in Jakarta because there are a lot of initiatives from the startups, especially from the NVU ventures, to start building the reuse ecosystems in Jakarta. Next slide. So next slide. So why reuse? So there's a new publication from the University of Portsmouth and the Breakthrough from Plastics entitled Making Reuse a Reality. So in this amazing report, they suggested that a definition of reuse is a comprehensive system for a multiple rotations of reusable packaging, which remains within the ownership of the systems and is loaned to the consumers. If you're familiar with the gas for kitchens, gas stove, and the water gallons, it's kind of similar, but we want to adopt it into another economy, like for the cosmetics, for the home care products, F&B services. So we want to make reuse is available in every economic sectors, because they're the one who produces a lot of single-use plastics. Next slide. Besides that, reuse is one of the mitigations efforts to the climate change. There are several reports stated that reuse systems can provide 32% reductions in carbon dioxide emissions. And if it's standardized, the reuse can also reduce bigger reductions to the greenhouse gases. So I think this is one of the solutions both for the plastic pollutions and also the climate change. Next slide. And also reuse is very circular. We can see that the definition from the University of Portsmouth, the models is very circular, from the manufacturer or the F&B services goes to the consumers, and then can go back to the F&B services and the manufacturers, and we use the same reusable containers. And the important things in the reuse systems is the washing facilities and the reverse logistics to make it happen. Next slide. Next slide. You can read everything in the report, and it's very amazing. And this is the eye-opening report to make us understand about the reuse. Next slide. So what we do in Jakarta, so we work with NVU Ventures to solve 3 types of single-use plastic pollutions. The first one is the food packaging. So there are a lot of food packagings out there, especially during the pandemic. E-commerce and also the delivery systems is increasing, but unfortunately they use a lot of single-use plastic packaging like PS foam, clamshell plastics, and everything. So as well as the drinking cups, whether it's plastic cups or the paper line with plastics cups. So Alas is one of the NVU ventures. They provide reusable food packaging and reusable stainless steel cups, and work with the restaurants and cafes to help us consumers to have an options. So when we open an app and choose the restaurants, they will have an options to the reusable packaging and the reusable stainless steel cups. And the Alas team will contact us whether we want to, whether we the packaging can be picked up by them, and then they will sterilize, and then they will distribute it into the restaurants and cafe. And that's the way it is. It's very circular. And also the multi-layer or sachet or pouch, which is a big problem in Asia. So they have the venture called Alner and Kiosk. For Alner, they provide a reusable and refillable in plastic bottles for the personal care and the home care, and work with community. So we have a waste bank in our village, and also mom and pop shop, and also in the women's community in the village. So those three are the distribution points. And if you buy from them, you can also return the packaging from them, and the Alner team will sterilize and refill it again and go back to the distribution center. Kiosk is dispensing machines. They work with one of the FMCGs to provide a refillable cereals and milk, and work with the supermarkets. Next slide. So this is the future that we want. So to mainstream the reuse systems, we need to work with the industry. We need to work with governments to standardize the policy, and also the needs of collaborations with the public-private community. So these ecosystems is already out there. We need to connect them with the reuse systems, how to connect them with the manufacturers, the providers, the retailers, and hotel, restaurant, cafe, the dropping points, the reverse logistics, and also the washing facilities. Next slide. I want to show you what is it like if these ecosystems happens in the F&B delivery services. So this is based on the ALAS studies. They work with many restaurants and cafes, and they provide ALAS provides the reusable packaging for foods and for the drink, and they work with consumers to educate them, to invite them to use their services, and they work with Westbike Messenger for the reverse logistics, how to connect from the consumers into the ALAS washing facilities. And then they also help ALAS to distribute the clean, sterilized food packaging and stainless steel cups into the restaurants. And then we have the systems called Gojek and Grab that provides the foods delivery services that go back to connects with the consumers. And we also work with the governments, the Ministry of Environment, and also the government of Jakarta on how they can also create the regulations that enables this reuse ecosystems. Next slide. And this is for the personal care and cleaning products. So we want every FMCGs in the world to start adopting the reuse ecosystems. There are a lot of options, a lot of box store out there, and also we have in Jakarta we have Alner and Kiosk, which is really close to the community. And also the good news is last year when I did these presentations in the Break Free from Plastics events, I always said that our Indonesian FDA is not giving the permissions for the bulk store, for the producers or the providers to have a refill mechanisms for the personal care. But this year, starting March 2023, they have this new regulation revising the previous regulations that give a permissions for the all producers and the providers to make refill ecosystems, a refill mechanism for the personal care. So it's one of the big win for us that now our governments allowing us to have a refill mechanisms, and it's very it was very a happy moment for us. And the next one is after the refill, we want them to also enable the reuse ecosystem, which the returnable systems is mandatory. But we work on that, but with the refill systems, it's one of our big wins this year. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. Next slide. So there are a lot of needs to enable the reuse ecosystems in Indonesia. So this one is, we recommend to across sectors in the ministry, not only the Ministry of Environment, but also the Industrial Ministry, Health Ministry, Indonesian FDA, and the local governments to oversee these potentials to the reduction of single-use plastics. And also the needs to involve more business sectors, not only hotel, restaurant, cafe, but also the retailers, the traditional market, e-commerce. It's also an important actors in these reuse ecosystems. Next slide. And this is the regulatory package that needs in Indonesia. So far, we have the regulations on the waste reductions roadmaps for the producers, which includes the reuse as the efforts to reduce the waste, and also the new regulation from the FDA that enables the refill systems for the personal care. While we still need the national standard for the reuse packaging, the national standard for the washing facilities, and also the local government's regulation that enables the reuse ecosystems. Next slides.
Sorry, Ryan, we are
Yes,
out
this
of time
is
now.
the last slide. Next slide. So we gather with the startups and other NGOs to build the strong movements for the reuse, and also just a few months ago during the INC2 for the Global Plastic Treaty, we give the recommendations to Indonesia on the reuse. You can also find this policy paper in our website. So I think that's all from me. Thank you so much. Over to Arpita.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I know it was really hard to sort of talk about systemic change in such a short time, but you did a fabulous job. And I'm hoping that the report we have shared from Break Free from Plastic would also help folks provide sort of understanding of the reuse system. Thank you, everyone. And I think we have very little time, but I'm wondering if we can go through a few questions that I have from the attendees today. So I want to start with this question on, which I'm hoping Magesh could help answer. There's a strong lobby among beverage manufacturers taking the position that single-use PET is fine because it is so easy to recycle. I have also heard that nanotechnology is being used to engineer PET plastic that is infinitely recyclable, and also the fact that PET plastic is non-toxic. Magesh, do you think you can answer this question? Sorry, you'll need to unmute, please.
Yeah. I'm not really an expert on this, but in terms of our view is that, whether it's PET or anything, it is still single-use plastics and it will still create waste. It's using a lot of fossil fuels, so that is not the answer to the solution. So what Ryan had presented just now in terms of the reuse system. So if you have a water bottle, which is like made from stainless steel or other things, which you can reuse. So this is a much better option. So in terms of more of the scientific facts, I think probably Lisa would be able to respond to that.
Yeah, if I may add to that with regard to the toxicity. So actually, during my PhD, I was conducting a study looking at chemicals in different types of plastics, including PET and their toxicity. And there we basically found that PET might be better than other materials in general, but then it really depends on the individual composition of each PET. So in our study, there were also PET products which actually included or comprised toxic chemicals. So we cannot make a general conclusion on that.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And I know you're already speaking, so I think I can bring up another question for you. The toxicity studies that you mentioned, were they for bio-based plastics alone or for biodegradable plastics as well?
To make it short, they were on both.
Awesome. And another question, what about biotransformation where SUP is transformed by microorganisms into a wax that is shown as non-toxic to the soil? A reference material, polymaterial. Can this be considered as a preferred option to bioplastic and biodegradable single-use plastics? Lisa, I think this is also for you.
Yeah, so actually, I have never heard of this polymateria, so I would need to have a look into it. Yeah, so I cannot really say anything with regard to it, but maybe what I want to reinforce that still these materials, they all need resources, and if they are still made for single use, yeah, I think we should not like just switch from one material to another, but rather try to reduce material use, as for example, by reuse system as just presented as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. And I know we are out of time, but I'm wondering if, Ryan, you can answer the question around participation of informal waste sector in the reuse system in Jakarta.
Yes, I actually already wrote it in the Q&A section, but in general, our current projects is, as I said before, Alner, one of the NVU ventures, is working with the waste bank. It's one of the informal sectors that collected waste in a village level. But this year, we will start having a new research that's exploring whether working with the waste picker for in the reuse systems is also one of the options. So I don't have the answer for now, but hopefully by the end of this year, I have the clear answer for that. Thank you.
Excellent. And Faye has also shared the plastic solution review website, which has a lot of details about different false alternatives. So thank you, Faye, for that. The next question, one argument against bioplastic was a safety aspect due to chemicals in the material. Can you comment how this problem is solved in a reuse system? Would reuse packaging not require the same additives and processing aid, potentially even more, such as more UV stabilizers for a long lifetime? Would you expect increased leaching of chemicals when materials start to age after multiple use, washing cycles? And this is from somebody who's in favor of reuse system, but I think want to be careful about pushing them forward. Whoever wants to go first, please go ahead.
We have this research with the PR3 to explore the available reusable packaging for the F&B surfaces in the market. And yes, we even for the reuse, we still need to be careful to choose the reusable packaging, because if it's for the F&B, it's we need to be extra careful whether the packaging will release some chemicals or bacteria for the foods or drinks that we consume. I already put the link in the answered question Q&A. There's a English versions on this, but it's a preliminary study, and the PR3 is working more to make it the study comprehensive. And yeah, and I think if we have another series of the webinar, we can also invite the PR3 out to describe how they built this standard for the F&B reusable packaging.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan, for being proactive. And I wanted to quickly check with Ramon sir on how he feels about bioplastics and their usage being promoted in the healthcare sector, and how are you combating that? What's healthcare without harm's position?
In terms of the bioplastics, we are in agreement with the rest of the panelists here that we should be very cautious, if not immediately refuse the so-called bio plastics because it's also does harm both to the environment and to people because in the end there is now validation, a clear validation of various claims on what is really materials that compose such as so-called bioplastics. And therefore, on the from the health perspective view, we would rather go back to our call that we refuse, we go for the reuse, and in the hospital setting, to go along sustainable procurement, such as in certain hospitals in the Philippines, for example, there is now an ongoing experiment to go back to use of glass bottle for medical purposes, for example, like transfusion, the way it used to be. Now, at the onset, it seems to be more expensive, and yet, if you look at the cost of using plastic bottles for medical purposes, that is expensive now and more expensive because of the environmental harm it carries. So the scale has to be raised such that it would be multiple hospitals going back. We will see that then the cost could be reduced, but ongoing on this point of going back to glass bottles such that it becomes usable in healthcare setting.
Thank you so much. And I know your voice was breaking, but I think we can conclude here and broadly to let all the participants also know the answer is reuse and refill systems. And we know these systems existed 10, 20, 30 years back, and we were happy with that world as well. And I think the plastics were pushed by the industry, so we know that we can go back. Essentially, the idea is to go a little bit back. It sounds regressive, but it's actually going to be progressive and better for all of our health and the environment well-being of the world. And in terms of jobs and livelihood, and I know that is a question that comes up, and integration of waste pickers, sort of workers in small and medium enterprises. I know we also have zero waste systems that will employ people. Gaia has a report on zero waste to zero emissions that you could reference to as well. But I'd like to conclude here and deep appreciation for all of your time and all of your energies and efforts and everything that you do. And thank you also to the participants. And I'm hoping Faye and Ia could help collate the rest of the questions and we can provide the answers through email and other means. Thank you so much and wish you all a very good rest of your day.